Why does everyone have to have stupid names for their AI? Like, why can't it be Google AI and Microsoft AI? Chat GPT and Bard? Come on.
Well, Chat GPT isn't even a stupid name. It's a very technical name.
Which means it's
Yeah.
stupid.
This podcast contains the arguably witty banter of two friends, Skippy and Doogles, that like to debate about investing. The content is intended to be entertaining and for informational purposes only, not investment advice. You should do your own research and consult a financial professional before using any of the information in this podcast, and especially before investing.
Yeah, our content producer killed it again last week.
Crushed it.
Our boy is just killing it every time. We talk Disney, and then what happens with Disney? They make drastic moves as soon as our podcast hits the airwaves. I don't know what to say.
I read this piece the last week that we're not going to talk about today, but is The Man Who Moves All Markets, something like that. It's about Carson Block, the short seller. But I feel like it should have been about Skippy.
The podcast that moves the layoff world.
Yeah. The podcast that moves no markets. Yeah. You doing well this week?
Yeah, man. How about you?
Yeah. Good week.
If I was going to peer into the future, I think that our boy Adam Neumann of WeWork fame and has a new company called Flow. And I would predict that company might have some layoffs in the future. If they ever hire anybody, we'll see.
And I hope not for the people involved. I know you do too. I hope not.
I'm just joking here. Yeah.
And should we play his explanation of what the company does? Because last time we talked about it, we kind of seemed like we might understand some of it, but not really. But he talked a little more.
Skippy and Doogles show got an inside peek at the pitch.
Twitter.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
So number one, management company, branded technology first. Number two, real estate asset management, a company that can buy real estate and asset manage real estate. Number three, financial services. And the fourth pillar is this mechanism that's going to take some of the value and share it with the value creators. And those users are going to start using our financial services. Now, the reason they're going to use the financial services, that payments company that's charging your rent already has a real relationship with the user. And then if we are able to take this value creating mechanism and share with our residents a portion of the value, it's going to make them feel ownership. If you're in your apartment building and you're a renter and your toilet gets clogged, you call the super. If you're in your own apartment and you bought it and you own it and your toilet gets clogged, you take the plunger. And it's the difference when feeling like you own something to just feeling like you're renting, from being transactional to actually being part of a community.
Excellent.
Yeah, where do I write my check? I mean, big ideas people deserve praise because I'm not always a big ideas person. So it's a big idea. But as he talks through that, Doogles, man, I don't know. Usually in life, there's a reason companies specialize in certain niches because they're really good at it. Like when he talks about the real estate purchaser also being the asset manager effectively, and then he ties on the financial services arm that does the payments. Like I've paid my cable company for 20 or 30 years. I have no desire to have them do my financial services business. And it to me, it seems like there's too much there. Like, I don't know how you can be great at all those pieces of the pie.
You might remember a certain pitch from about, maybe not a year ago, 9 months ago, where the pitch was effectively, AWS, they do storage. Twitter, they do communication. Netflix, they do entertainment. We gonna do all those things for you. We are called Truth Social. You remember this?
Not really, no.
Yeah, it was. We'll go back and put the pitch deck from that on the Substack on Monday. But it laid out all the services of the internet and said, imagine if you combine those all into one. And it was run by the Apprentice star. What was the pitch? Yeah, no, I get this one. I think when the plunger thing. Your toilet gets clogged, you call the super. No, your toilet gets clogged, you call the proctologist. I do like the end of it, right? The high level point around ownership. Mm-hmm. I think that's important.
The initial pitch when A16Z gave him money, right, it was some large amount of money. Was it 300 million or something? It was about creating almost apartments where the renters had more ownership because they felt more connected. And like that general pitch, I can follow and it makes sense. And you want that. That does make people treat their apartment with more respect. And if there's appreciation on property value and some of that's shared with them, it does create an ownership piece. So I love that piece of the idea. It's just to hear him articulate it this way, for me, I would have been remember like the old school American Idol when what's that dude named Randy something would be like, not for me, dog.
Or no, Randy, the black dude you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
He'd be like, it's
Randy
not
Jackson.
for me, dog.
Yeah.
So I could have followed the logic there. I have no desire to want to. Well, and I think the piece that I feel like is really missing is all that stuff comes at a cost to have a financial services arm branded on top of your asset management company who's acquiring real estate and then maintaining that real estate. It all costs money. So the ownership piece is going to come when they can walk across the street and actually buy their own rental unit for less than they would be to pay rent with this small fraction of feeling like ownership for flow. I just don't think it's going to happen.
I don't know. And I agree. In addition to what you were talking about earlier with regard to the specialization piece, I'm also kind of thinking if I'm listening to this pitch, I'd say, okay, all right, so you got these first two. Okay, value creation. All right, I get that. You're creating value. Then your plan is to then give that value, not to me, just to be clear, I'm the investor here. Your plan is to give that value not to me, but to these folks. I'm not going to call this quite a Ponzi, but it sounds like you're creating value over here and giving this value to this group. And this group signs up because of the value you're giving to them. And the only reason you can create new value is because of the value you're giving away. Is that the model exactly? I'm not saying that that's the model, but it's
I might be saying that's the model. That's the WeWork model. It was borrow, buy, spend, get a peak valuation and then run away.
I don't think he ran so much as there was a boot in his booty.
Well, for good reason, right?
Booty booting.
Oh,
all right,
man.
I'm going to reach into the fishbowl and hit on a topic that we've discussed a few times here on the pod. I'm going to bring it back for a little quick hit situation. We're going to talk about buy now, pay later. This is a set of services where individuals are able to purchase goods, which historically have been zero interest rate for larger purchases. Like Peloton really, I think, made this big, especially for Affirm. You have 0% interest rate on buying a $3,000 bike. You're like, why the heck would I not do this? Affirm gets paid by the merchant. So it's like a cheaper way for the merchant to get new traffic and new sales. Awesome. So that's buy now, pay later. We've discussed previously how this could potentially get consumers into trouble because you're getting all these low interest rates, because most of it wasn't zero, low interest rate loans, and sounds like a really good deal. You stack up enough of them, they sneak up on you. That happened. So we've already cataloged that. We predicted that happened. Now it seems like the buy now, pay later companies, or at least Affirm, is getting itself a little bit into trouble.
So what's so interesting about this is the complex adaptive system in which we live in a zero interest rate world. So let's rewind to 2 years back. If Peloton's selling a $3,000 bike and the consumer is going, I don't necessarily want to pay $3,000 this month, but if I pay a portion of that over the next 6 to 12 months, like that's a win, especially when it's branded to them as like, and there's no additional cost to you for financing this. It's just a couple $100 a month or whatever. And then Peloton paying Affirm, I don't know the exact fee, but let's call it $100 for simplicity's sake. $100 to provide that service is like, seems like a win-win-win, right? Because Peloton's happy to spend $100 to get that bike into the hands of a consumer. Affirm's happy in a very low interest rate environment to effectively provide financing on $3,000 for only $100 in true profit in the door. And it works. We're in a very different environment now. We're not in zero interest rate land.
We're not.
And so if those And why does that matter for a firm? Sorry if I'm jumping ahead here, Doogles, but like one, that means your default rates are either already on the rise or they will soon be on the rise. And that equation doesn't work if you can't actually collect the $3,000 that you're owed. Two, the $100, and again, this is a made up figure, that might not be competitive based on what you could make if you took that same amount of funds and put it in a money market account anymore. Or if you have to take out debt to finance that purchase, which often companies have to do, often banks have to do, all of a sudden you're upside down. So the business model is almost entirely different right now than it was 2 years ago. Has to be.
Yeah. And I go back to when I first heard about Affirm, when Affirm was starting, I don't remember exactly when, let's call it like 10, 15 years ago. It was like somewhere in that, I think closer to 10 years ago. Affirm was starting, and I was like, this is super cool and inspirational to me, because what I remember the pitch being, it's as you described in that win-win-win situation, but additionally, it was a way for underserved markets to be able to participate in the economy. Because these folks many times are unbanked or underbanked, right? Might not have access to credit, to funds, et cetera. And so it was saying, like, how do we get these individuals to be able to buy goods that they wouldn't be able to otherwise? And we have this win-win-win model. It's like, cool. Like that's conceptually really cool. Then it became, how do you buy your Peloton? So then
actually, that's where I was going. Leave it to America to be like, this really cool company comes out, it's going to change the world. And where it gains success is like how to buy your ultra luxury bike with a TV on top that no one needs and sells you with a $60 subscription cost per month. That's what America does.
Boom. That's how America do. That's right. And to your point, so now I don't know what the number was before, but now 67% of volume is interest bearing, because we are in a different world. Going from the world where it was like the Peloton, the larger price tag for really low interest, now to Amazon is 20% of gross volume for Affirm. So it's more like the low priced goods. And their merchant partner APRs are up to 36%, is what this Wall Street Journal article was saying. 36% on the merchant side. And I'm just kind of thinking, and to your point, sorry, before I even get to that, to your point, one of the issues has been that the way that they wrote their contracts apparently was such that they didn't take into account maybe not the possibility, but the reality of what happened around interest rates rising. And so they have not been able to make or pass on the cost to them onto the consumer. That's like one of the issues that's facing them. And I texted you this, and then you texted me back something, and I'd love to dive into it a little more, because my thinking was, how could they pass on all of those costs without effectively just becoming credit card companies? Like, that's what I couldn't quite figure out. Like, if they start to get to the rates that it would take for them to make money here, I don't know where the appeal is, like the difference really is. Like, that's what I couldn't quite figure out.
The credit card business model is more tried and true. Let's say that. They've been around longer. Almost all credit card companies have variable rates to accommodate for an environment like the last 2 years, because they know when their default rates increase, they need to recoup more of that because they're going to write off more of their total fundings. So to simplistically answer your point, their business model needs to evolve to something that's closer to the credit card companies if they want to survive this. Affirm's, you sent me the chart, right? They're down 87% from IPO or something, and it's been a rough couple of years, or a rough year. Of course it has. Now, the idea, like what you talked about when you first heard about the company in the initial pitch, they could probably still serve the underserved community, but that community is a tough one to serve if the economy totally in times of recession, those are often the hardest hit consumers, which means they're going to have the greatest default rates, and that's not a fun place to play if you're a firm.
No, it's
so
they're in a tough spot.
I mean, I personally think, and I might actually pull the 10K, read it, and do a deep dive here because this is a fascinating business model. But this might be a business model that gets people really excited at the end of a 10-year or a 13-year bull run in a low interest rate environment that doesn't work, that doesn't ride out the storm when times get really tough.
Unfortunately, I would say, unfortunately, because of course, unfortunately, but because it is like it has the potential for this win-win-win that you talked about. And these types of businesses are huge accelerators for bubbles. The main accelerant, might be overstating here, but I say the main accelerant for an economic bubble is access to credit.
Yeah.
And this is access to credit for everybody, right? Just like in the financial crisis, access to credit for everyone for real estate like was a thing. I'm not saying it's to that scale, or I'm not saying that they were being sneaky. I'm not saying all that. So I don't mean to make the analogy that way. I just mean like, and not just Affirm, but the buy now, pay later space is like access to credit, which is great for the everyday consumer until it's not.
I mean, there's two things I want to continue to talk about with you. One, that statement, it's great for the everyday consumer. I think it's great for the everyday consumer if you're buying goods that are more investment like to be able to purchase a home is great.
Yep.
I'm not sure that it's great for the everyday consumer to buy a Peloton bike.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
A depreciating asset that so
you're right.
And then the other thing I need to check on, because I keep rereading the sentence. You mentioned it earlier. It says the company said that 23% of interest-bearing volume was being offered by merchant partners at annual percentage rates of 36% for the most recent quarter versus 10% for the quarter prior. So am I interpreting that correctly, that Affirm used to be a lower cost way to finance for the average consumer than a credit card, and currently it's a higher cost way to finance versus a credit card, because the average credit card rate is still like high teens to low 20s, right? So if they're charging people 36%, I guess I don't know how much of that is being paid by the merchant.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I couldn't figure out, which, going back to your 10K point, I think it's important to, if we want to dive into this, to go through the 10K to understand more of how the back end mechanics work, because that's something I couldn't quite figure out from the article, is how that 36% like splits out. Is that cost to Affirm that they're not fully pushing along? Is that the cost purely to the consumer? Like, I couldn't quite figure out where that APR came into play, but the switch that you just like mentioned around the 10% going to 23%, like more than double of the volume is at rates that are really, really high, is like massive. So there's something there.
Well, and so the last thing I wonder about when we talk about Affirm is, if there's a way to ride through an economic storm, it would be that you'd say, I'll continue to use the Peloton example. You'd say Peloton is going to really struggle at the depths of a recession. So Peloton would be willing to pay a greater financing cost to Affirm. So that $3,000 bike, let's say Peloton used to pay $100 to Affirm. Maybe they'd be willing to pay $300 to Affirm. The problem with that is they also probably have to cut the cost of the bike to $2,000 to unload the things during the depths of a recession. And I just don't know if the economics end up working on all sides where it's still a win-win-win, because clearly Affirm is financing more risky debt at that point in the cycle. And I don't know if Peloton could pay the bills if they pay Affirm more money and cut the price of the bikes and everything else. So we'll see. We'll watch it.
It's going to be rough. It's gonna be rough. Hopefully they can break their way out of this, but I think it's gonna be rough. All right, what's in the fishbowl for Yout?
The easy one is Disney, but I'm gonna save that for a little bit. I want to talk college football. The economics of sports has always been so fascinating for me, and there's these examples of nonsensical investments that happen in college because people's emotions are tied to things. So you see that with NIL deals, name, image, and likeness. The most famous one is quarterback from California who signed a deal for $13.2 million for 4 years which is more than a first round draft pick in the NFL would make. And because of the way the rules are written, you're not allowed to say for playing football. So this happened with a collective at the University of Florida, and the contract came out. The contract said like has to live in Gainesville, Florida, and has to participate in college or in athletic endeavors or something, basically implying he had to play football for the University of Florida to collect the funds. Anyway, that all blew up. Now he's collecting $0 at Arizona State. Cracks me up. It's the Wild West out there. But part of that is happening with the name and image and likeness piece. And part of it is happening in the universities with investments in new facilities. And so Oregon State University just built a new stadium, spent $162 million to tear down their existing stadium and build a brand new one. And here's what they did, Doogles. Imagine you're an analyst that ran the numbers on this. And this is maybe where Wall Street would be better involved than academic provider. Last year, this couple had 2 seats close to the 50-yard line in the first level. The total cost was $960. The new stadium for the year.
Okay.
That's like 6-7 games. The new stadium is almost complete. They got their breakdown. It will cost $6,000 to have those same seats this year.
Excellent. That's all I would do. If I got that in the mail, I got that letter, I'd read it and go, excellent. That's like, what do you do with your 10x increase?
What's
not
worse,
quite 10x,
in my opinion, so college sports is also really weird, and they like break down your costs. They say, in order to have your tickets, you have to send a donation over here, and we require you to buy parking or whatever. So here's the breakdown: $780 for tickets. That doesn't sound so bad. But then a $4,000 donation to like their university's funding arm, $700 donation for the construction fund on the stadium, $20 for handling, and $200 for parking.
What?
So I know I've rambled here, but basically, what analyst goes, hey, you know what makes sense to get this new stadium built? We'll just increase ticket prices by 6 times. Like, you could double them, and people would go, oh, this really sucks, but like, I love my university, and we have a brand new stadium, and this is great. You could triple them, and people would probably start throwing stuff at you, but they still might pay. But if you go 6 times, I don't understand how the economics make sense. I don't understand who signed off on this.
Desperation, maybe. I don't know. It's ridiculous. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous, which is why that would be my only reaction if I opened up the letter that stated that, because you just, what is this?
I chose a poor topic for my fishbowl because it's so ridiculous. It's not even debatable.
No, it's not. Like that's so ridiculous. Oh man.
All right. What's in your fishbowl?
Okay. I'm going to connect a couple things together, I think, up in here, but the core of it is going to be about pessimism and how pessimism's always everywhere, right? It rules the day. We've talked about it before, right? We talked about the perma bears and all that stuff. There was this piece that came out called Apocalypse is Nigh. Apocalypse being worst case. Nigh being now? I actually don't know what nigh means. But
yeah.
Anyway. I don't know. But anyway, it's nigh, people. So this is written by Bob Seawright at an investment advisory firm that I can't remember. Anyway, so he's an investor. The core of this is about how everyone's always talking about how bad everything is, and human beings like really fear uncertainty, especially. I love this part. He brings in a whole different bunch of examples about how pessimism's everywhere. But I really like this one around uncertainty. He talks about Steven Spielberg and Jaws and how it's the music that made Jaws scary. Like, you take these 2 simple notes, and he's like, you can play that anywhere, and that's fear. It's the anticipation of what might happen. And it brought up for me Jurassic Park. So the Jurassic Park dinosaurs in the original Jurassic Park, this movie is over 2 hours long. How many minutes of it had dinosaurs?
I'm supposed to guess 17.
Pretty close, 15 minutes. So it actually
Okay.
might be 17 because 15 sounds too exact.
Yeah,
But yeah, so about 15 minutes of this 2-hour movie, right, had dinosaurs in it. Movie, just to be clear, it was about dinosaurs. And it's the same thing. It's Steven Spielberg again, but with this thought that it's more about like the sound, the anticipation, right, the fear of what's coming. And so that's what human beings are always very scared of. I'm going to give you some data here about climate change. So the big fear that everyone has now, like world's coming to an end because of climate change. In fact, in this survey that went out, quote unquote, humanity is doomed due to climate change. And this is saying that across all countries, according to the survey, it was for 16 to 25-year-olds. And the question was, does climate change make you think humanity is doomed? There were 1,000 people surveyed in each country. Across all the countries, 56% of people said, yes, humanity is doomed. That I'm not even saying climate change, anything about climate change specifically. It's just saying that that's where we get to. Like we always get to this point where like everything's coming to an end. And it like generally doesn't come to an end is like a broad point that has here. He then starts to get to, let's go back to perma bears here. Mm-hmm. He brings up our good friend, Mr. Grantham, and lays out very respected investor. This is not about Jeremy Grantham in general, but this is an example of something. 4 different pieces here. The first with the headline, Jeremy Grantham, big stock bubble will end badly in 2016. This piece was written in 2014. Next up, why are stock market prices so high? By Jeremy Grantham in 2017. Jeremy Grantham, the market bubble will burst in weeks or months. October 2020. Prepare for an epic finale. Jeremy Grantham warns tragedy looms as super bubble may burst. August 2022.
I know your point here is to throw Grantham under the bus, but my boy, Jeremy Grantham, I just have to defend him a little bit. At least there are people that go on CNBC or whatever and say this every week without like a story behind it. His stuff is based in clear valuation. So effectively, since the first article was written in 2016, the US stock market has been out of the valuation norm. Now, in retrospect, could he have been more nuanced in the way he communicates this and been less like doomsday-esque? Absolutely. And I bet he wishes that. But he's not just your average Yahoo.
Okay, hold on. Yes, I agree. I agree with that. You bet he wishes that he had. The last headline I gave you was from 5 months ago.
Well, I mean, he got it right eventually.
Yeah, which comes back to the point of, and this quote is not about Jeremy Grantham, but lots of careers have been made by being right once in a row. Now, that is not about Jeremy Grantham, because Jeremy Grantham has been right from an investment standpoint a lot of times in a row.
Since like the 60s, man.
Yes,
maybe the 70s.
So. I know, but the point is that people like you, pessimism, right, rules the day. And do you know who else loved Jeremy Grantham, by the way? Put that aside for a moment. Yeah. Do you know who else had a story behind their great pessimism? Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich wrote a book called The Population Bomb back in 1968, which said that hundreds of millions of people were going to die of starvation in the 1970s. There was a story behind it. So according to you, that means it has all the validity in the world. So
we're really going. This is going to be fun.
No.
Yeah.
But so Noah Smith, who writes, said no opinion. It's Noah opinion. Always got to be clear on that one. No opinion. Substack. He wrote about Paul Ehrlich in January. And so Paul Ehrlich wrote this book, Population Bomb. Everybody's going to die, right? And I like this. What it ignores is all the various countermeasures that people will take against emerging problems and all the ways they'll adapt to new conditions. Countermeasures and adaptations act as a dampening force, slowing down the trend lines before catastrophe hits. Sometimes, though, not always, slowing it enough to avoid catastrophe entirely. Again, that doesn't happen all the time. But the point of that is that when there are times when everybody's so negative, right, about it, when like the negativity feels that obvious, people do start to act. And it's not that it automatically corrects, but when negativity is that bad, people often do start to act. I think in the investing world, in the stock market, it can be a little bit different. But like in general, I like that. You got
No,
something to say?
I mean, now we're talking. This is straight out of my book right here. This is why I don't mind buying the companies that's on really tough times, because those people show up and work hard and often fix it. I totally agree with that.
Yeah. A couple more points, and then we can continue on. So then Bob C. Wright, the author here, goes back to investing. Says in investing, which is what he does, safety is never guaranteed. On the other hand, by taking insufficient investment risk, we run the risks of not meeting our goals. Right? So you have to be able to balance risk. It's easy to be paralyzed by risk, to fail to make the trade, or decide not to go with the startup, or not to have the guts to ask the girl out. These failings don't make us or keep us safe. Safety is never guaranteed. And then he brings The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe into it, which is where things get really awesome. So the old C.S. Lewis book, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Life, like investing, isn't tame any more than Aslan, the great lion in the Narnia stories, is tame. When Lucy inquires about Aslan in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, she says, "Is he quite safe?" Mr. Beaver offers a penetrating reply. "Safe? Who said anything about safe? Of course he's not safe, but he's good." When I was first reading this, I was like, why are we in a wardrobe? But I really do like that piece. Like, I think it's interesting just around safety. We're not talking about like something being safe. We're not talking about anything being guaranteed, but you kind of have to be able to balance risk. And just because something is a good idea doesn't mean that it's a safe idea, right? I like that point broadly. Then I'm going to tie a couple of the things into this.
Well, real quickly, before you tie, the piece is a roller coaster ride. It's a good read. The thing that cracked me up most, and I'm surprised you didn't mention it, is that like he tells a story of people that watched Jaws in upstate New York and then wouldn't go in the lake because they're fear of shark. Like, the human brain is incredibly brilliant and also incredibly stupid sometimes. There's not sharks in the lake. There's someone who suffered problems who lived in Kansas after watching Jaws because of their fear of sharks. Like, they're in Kansas. It's just fascinating.
What is in Kansas?
Toto?
Yes. Okay. Let's. I'm going to keep pulling this thread. What did Toto get caught up in weather-wise?
Tornadoes.
Yeah, that's in Kansas. What comes through tornadoes?
Sharknado. Here we go.
So you're saying that this is a fear that is not
Doogles.
justified. And I wouldn't have believed that this was true if there was just one Sharknado movie. But by the 36th Sharknado movie. All right, anyway, no, a couple other things I want to tie into this. So one is there's this New York Post article, which won't go into much, by Ken Fisher. And what it shows is that right now, like so many people, according to like the stats that are in here, are betting on a recession. One example, a survey from the Conference Board shows 98% of American CEOs expect an economic downturn within 12 to 18 months, with 99% forecasting the same for Europe. Then I don't know if he was trying to get hip-hoppy or whatever, but dropped a couple of rhymes. When you beware, you prepare. Anticipation is mitigation. I just feel like Jesse Jackson is like coming up in here when he starts talking. But anyway, the point, to tie it back, the reason I bring this up is that when so many people are anticipating the recession, then you start to see action which might mitigate the potential downside. It doesn't eliminate, and it may not always come true, but what it means here is like that's when companies are cutting costs, right? They're thinking about, right? And so
I gotta jump in, Doogles.
Yeah, jump in. Double Dutch.
No, sometimes it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Sometimes,
because like when I talk to leadership teams and we don't feel great about the economy, we might not make the investments or spend the money that we would if we felt better about the economy. And that cascades throughout the market. So it's not quite as simple. I totally agree, because we like I already said on this podcast that it's so complex that it's really hard to predict things. This is why generally I think predictions are stupid. But it's not as easy as his point either, that like, oh, everyone's freaking out and now we're gonna head fake here and not actually have a recession. Sometimes with inflation and recessions are probably the two most prominent examples. If people think that is coming, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy and it actually comes.
You're right. It's way too complex to make it that simple, but I think it's an interesting point. And there's a book called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley,
Yes.
which hits on similar like concepts here. It's basically humanity's always said it's doomed. Humanity is still around. The book is more complicated than this, but it's just like a kind of a broad point that I think is worth a read. The Rational Optimist.
I have a dumb question. I know you like grew up in the New York area, so this is just naivety on my part. But if you're Ken Fisher and you want to go write an opinion piece, why do you go to the New York Post? Like, why don't you go to the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times?
Yeah. So what you're doing there, you're making this assumption that this is the first place Ken Fisher went.
There we go. I mean, do we think there were some other places that turned this opinion piece down?
That I don't know. That I don't know.
But for those who can't see Doogles, he's throwing his hands in the air right here.
I was actually surprised to see that byline, because when I see New York Post, like Ken Fisher isn't what I would expect to see in the byline. But nothing against New York Post, nothing against Ken Fisher.
Again,
but something against the combination of the two, I think.
Quick hit on my end. If we're switching to my fishbowl, there was a kind of an opinion piece by Jared Dillon. His Substack is wggtb.substack.com. And he talks about having a healthy relationship with money. I'll cut straight to the chase. He talks about basically cheapskates that don't spend enough and people that spend way too much. And he just is effectively saying, if you're on the either end of that spectrum, your relationship with money probably isn't perfect. I think it resonated with me because I've been on parts of that spectrum before. And like, he gives some really simple examples that I thought were cool. One is like, let's say you're not a college kid or not someone that's like really struggling to make the rent. If you're so-called middle class in this country, if you're like getting fired up if you lend someone $5 or $10 and they forget to pay you back, what does that mean? It probably means your relationship with money is unhealthy, because just the stress that some small faux pas like that causes you probably isn't worth what you're fretting over. Like, and there's lots of examples in this piece, but I thought it was a nice reminder, and it's really in your face, common sense, lots of cussing, but like, I liked it. I think it might be worth a read if you feel like you're on either end of that spectrum.
If you weren't interested in the piece before, when he started talking about the quantity of cussing, I hope that like really, really got you in there. This is Andrew Dice Clay Does Money, is what I'm thinking. I haven't read it, but I look forward to it. Can I end with one other quick hit?
Yeah.
I want to talk about faux pas, because you brought up faux pas.
Okay.
The AI wars are on, people. I'm not talking about Linda Hamilton. I'm not talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. What I'm talking about is Google v. Microsoft via OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So we discussed how Microsoft made a big investment in OpenAI. Microsoft is now integrating ChatGPT into Bing search. And Google says, no, not in my house. Straight up Mutombo finger. What do you call that? Swivel? I don't know. Shaky shakes? Anyway, says not in my house. Google says we own search. You can't own search. We're coming out with a new product. That product is called Bard. Our engineers are better than you.
Why does everyone have to have stupid names for their AI? Like, why can't it be Google AI and Microsoft AI? ChatGPT and Bard? Come on.
Well, ChatGPT isn't even a stupid name. It's like, it's a very technical name.
Well, which means it's stupid.
Okay. Okay, so Google says we're coming out with our own Bard. this week, Google releases the ad for Bard.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the only thing, but going back to the point, like, we discussed Charlie Munger and whatnot. It's just like avoid doing stupid. Like you don't even have to get the ad right. Just don't get the ad wrong.
Yeah.
And so in the ad that is celebrating the release of their brilliant AI functionality, the AI comes back with bad facts, like to the world. Google stock drops like 10% immediately when this happens.
$100 billion.
$100 billion.
And I know you watched Silicon Valley on HBO, but there's a episode where Hooli did effectively the exact same thing. So this was all forecast by Mike Judge. It's hilarious.
If you want to know how I'll even just say the technical technology business world has worked, does work, and will work ever into the future, watch Silicon Valley. It has everything in it, like everything in it. But yeah, so the fact was about the James Webb Telescope, and Bard came back and said that the James Webb Telescope took the first pictures of a planet outside of our solar system, and then a bunch of astronomers said, actually, the first picture was taken 14 years before the James Webb Telescope came out. So, it's not like the fact is a huge deal necessarily. It's just that, like, why wouldn't you get all the facts in your ad right?
No, I would say, gosh, huge deal is probably not the fact. The incorrect fact, I made up a new term, incorrect fact, is kind of a huge deal. I don't know why they chose to talk about the James Webb Telescope in their ad, because it's like pretty niche, but you're going to a niche where those people, that scientific community, like really cares. It's not like, what's the best movie out right now? And the AI spits back, oh, like Avatar is a highly popular movie at this point in time. That's debatable, that people are like, oh, whatever. It's like, no, this is a community of scientists that are going to fact check you like crazy. It was a stupid prompt to start, and then their AI got it wrong.
Yes, I'll give you that. I was playing around with Bing a little bit this week, and I wasn't particularly impressed with certain use cases.
Wait, so you sent me this on text, but does this mean you're part of the beta user group? Because like Bing is not live yet.
Well, I had 2 points.
Let's let you make your points, and I'll shut up.
Yeah. One of my points is that just might really be wrong in the end once all this is fully fleshed out. But one point is that I think that there's a conflation between the different ways that search is used, because there's some time when it's like, I'm going to put some text in a box and I want an answer that I can use elsewhere. And then I want to find something on the internet. And those are two different things that I haven't seen a use case where any of the new AI functionality satisfies that second like category.
Completely agree. Completely. And so that's why I'm on the wait list, and I really want to see how they mesh that, because I'm not going, like, I have access to Chat GPT. I'm not going there as my primary search engine. I'm going there for content creation, and it's almost like a research assistant where you can ask it a question and then it will bring back a bunch of information from various sources across the web and catalog it in one place. But it doesn't fulfill a lot of my search needs, which is like, tell me the 5 websites that have information on this, and I want to browse through all of them and effectively like use my own brain to make some decisions. And so I guess that's why I've been holding off on judging it until I get the formal go live, because I think you have to blend both those things, and I don't know how they're going to do it, but that's almost the secret sauce.
Yeah, or maybe they don't get blended. Like, I'm wondering, I don't know, right? The smart people that are spending billions of dollars to figure this out will like figure this out. But in my head, I'm taking the headlines that are coming out that are like, search will never be the same. And I'm like, I think maybe Google won't be the same, because Google is saying we organize the world's information, like as a company, right? And so this could be a different way to organize the world's information if you take it at that level. But should it be conflated with search? Like, I don't know. Can AI make search better? Sure. But none of the use cases make me think in that second category of search. That's my only point. So I'm interested because, again, smart people are spending billions of dollars to figure all this stuff out. And so maybe they do and should, to your point, bring them together. I just haven't seen like a straight up use case that is just like, find me, to your point, these 5 websites that, or like these 5, maybe not even websites. Let's say these 5 firsthand accounts of a thing that I can then consume the like firsthand take and make my own, use for my own. Like, I haven't seen that, which is a lot of search, I think, but I might just be old and antiquated.
I think the technology can be applied to that, and maybe it just hasn't yet.
Maybe, yeah.
The lamest example I think of where like AI has no positive impact currently, but might in the future is like, say I find a t-shirt I want to buy and I want to buy it for the lowest price. Typically, I'd look at the 5 most reputable places that are selling that thing, and then I compare shipping costs and everything else. And like, I haven't seen Chat GPT do that, but I don't know why Chat GPT couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so I think it might be about unleashing it for these other, what I'd call more common search requests. And then I think it could run with it and probably excel at it. It's just not there yet.
Yeah, I think you might be right. That's all I got.
Yeah, one last thing for me. Just wrap up the Disney loose end. We talked about our boy Nelson Peltz, who wanted Disney to make a bunch of cuts. And then February 8th, what was that, midweek, Wednesday, they announced all these things. They announced 7,000 job cuts and plans to slash $5.5 billion in costs. And he said, I'm cool with that. We don't need to talk about Bob Iger's salary anymore. Isn't it crazy how that happens, Doogles?
Yeah, it's a lot of people. There's just a lot of people in there. Yeah, I agree with you. All right, wrap time?
Yeah, guys, rate and review the podcast when you get a chance. That really helps the show. We'd love it if you share the podcast with a friend too. And hit skippydoogles.com for all things Skippy and Doogles, including how to find our Substack, how to send us listener mail, which is skippydoogles@gmail.com, the Twitter account, everything else.
Love it. Thank you.
Thanks.